Hi, this is Jonathan Rosenhead, the Torah and Psychotherapist. If we look at the classic model of cognitive behavior therapy, the CBT way of conceptualizing a person's ability to bring about change, from a classic CBT perspective, an ability to increase the level of control and bring about change in how a person functions. This is understood from the classic cognitive triangle, the model of how a person's behavior, thoughts, behaviors, and feelings all interact with one another. Certainly, if we go back to the initial understanding from a CBT perspective, it is looking at thoughts as being the primary, you could say the primary starting point in trying to understand how to bring about change in one's life. That the thoughts, if we look at how CBT understands this interaction, nowadays there is a little bit more of a dynamic understanding. There's a more of a reciprocal understanding and how this model is seen as more of an integrative model. But if we go back to the original understanding, you could say that the 101 of CBT, we start at the thoughts. Thoughts is the engine. That if we can work with one's thoughts, if we can try to understand the power behind one's thoughts, of how they then go on to influence and have a knock-on effect on how we behave. If we look at the original, again, if we go back to the traditional understanding, moving away from the original behavioral conceptualization that was more dominant in psychological models, moving into the cognitive model, the fusion between cognitive and behavioral really starts to understand how, if you can look at one's thoughts and understand that the thoughts are what then leads and feeds into, and in a way starts to construct one's behaviors in one's life. If we take that model, we get a really interesting insight into this week's parsha, and how this week's parsha presents the loisa aseh, the aveira, the commandment of not. If we take the words of the pasuk of loisa suru acharei levavechem va'acharei nechem asher atem zonim acharechem. This is a famous pasuk. Obviously, we say it in Kriya Shema, but what this pasuk is saying is, as the Minchas Chinuch explains, it's focusing on the aveira of hihurim. Hihurim is basically trying to teach, command. It's not just teaching, command the Bnei Yisrael to take greater control over where their thoughts go, over where their eyes go. It's trying to create an element of control of what we think about. At the minute, the Chazal, the Gemara explains that the levavechem, lo sasur acharei levavechem, is talking about avodah zarah. Einayim, when it's talking about that you shouldn't go after where your eyes are looking, that's talking about znus. These are aveiros that we know are well established already in terms of avodah zarah, in terms of kedusha. We have commandments already, which we have an established understanding that they are also. But what's being added here is a unique element of hihurim, of, in a way, it's the thoughts, it's the engagement, it's the attraction, the appeal, the interest to looking at and thinking about things that the Kadosh Baruch Hu is saying will lead us astray, will lead us into maladaptive, will lead us into aveiros, will lead us into destructive behaviors and actions. And as the Sefer HaChinuch explains this in a very pure CBT conceptualization, it says that the thoughts is the father. In a sense, the thoughts are seen as being the father, and our behavior is seen as the children. That's the way the Sefer HaChinuch presents it, and it really does fit into the traditional CBT understanding, that if we can work with one's thoughts, this is what the Sefer HaChinuch is saying, if we can work with one's thoughts to avoid trying to reduce, this is the important idea, reducing the engagement with inappropriate thoughts that can lead to avodah zarah, can lead to us to looking at and being engaged with znus, then this is the key to actually controlling, to an extent, changing and ensuring that our behaviors are in line with the kedusha and in line with what is expected from us from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So this is, although nowadays there has been a more of an upgraded understanding, a more dynamic perhaps understanding of how the CBT model works, the way that it's presented in the Parsha, and it fits into, as the way that the Sefer HaChinuch describes it, it really is understanding this basic connection of how thoughts lead into our behaviors and actions. And if we are able, and this is crucial, it's not saying to ignore and to avoid and to force yourself to not engage with these thoughts. What the Sefer Chinuch says is that we should try to reduce the level of connection and engagement and overly involving ourselves with these thoughts and thoughts and what we look at as well. It's actually taking a more humane understanding that we are people, and we are people that have our weaknesses as well. And although we want to try to avoid these things, the fact is thoughts come into our head. We see things, our eyes see things. We can't control every aspect and every element of our environment. From a very accurate and compassionate psychological perspective, the Sefer Chinuch is saying that if these thoughts come in our head, try not to be overly engaged. From a mindfulness perspective, which is a more modern inclusion, which has been integrated into the CBT model, without overly engaging and having almost like an interaction with these thoughts, you can just notice them, you can be aware of them, and try to, in a gradual, patient, understanding way, disconnect from them, not to give them too much time, and start to engage with other things. From a mindfulness perspective, to move your thoughts in a non-judgmental way to other things, to be engaged in Torah learning, to be engaged in actions of mitzvahs. This will help us to ensure that we keep the mitzvah, this commandment, this lo yisaseh of lo yisasuru acharei avechem v'acharei nechem asher atem zolim achreichem. So have a good Shabbos and keep well.